the town run by a criminal. At the edge of Alaska's Inside Passage, surrounded by mountains, ice, and freezing water, stood a town that trusted the wrong man with power. This was Skagway, Alaska. During the Klondike Gold Rush of the late 1890s, Skagway exploded overnight. Thousands of prospectors poured in, desperate to reach the gold fields of the Yukon. Supplies were scarce, law enforcement was weak, and chaos was inevitable. Into that chaos stepped a man who understood opportunity better than anyone else. His name was Jefferson "Soapy" Smith. He wasn't elected, he wasn't appointed, but he controlled Skagway. Soapy Smith built a criminal empire disguised as civic leadership. He ran gambling scams, extortion rings, and confidence schemes that stripped miners of their savings before they ever reached the gold fields. Police were bribed. Judges were intimidated. Witnesses stayed silent. To newcomers, Skagway looked like a normal frontier town. To those who stayed too long, it became clear who really held power. Men were robbed in broad daylight. Disappearances went unexplained. Justice depended on whether Soapy Smith approved of you. And for a time it worked. Skagway functioned, not because of law, but because crime had become organized. But criminal control always attracts resistance. And when resistance finally arrived, it ended in gunfire. This is the true story of Skagway, Alaska. The boomtown ruled by a criminal, until the moment the town fought back. Soapy Smith builds his empire. Soapy Smith didn't take over Skagway with violence at first. He took it with confidence. When thousands of exhausted prospectors arrived by ship, Skagway was their first stop. Most had never been this far north. Many carried everything they owned in cash. They were tired, overwhelmed, and eager to move on. Soapy understood that moment perfectly. He opened saloons, gambling halls, and businesses that looked legitimate on the surface. Inside, there were carefully designed traps. His most famous scam was simple: a fake telegraph office. Prospectors paid to send messages to loved ones back home, believing they were announcing their success. The wires led nowhere. The messages were never sent. The money was never returned. Other scams followed. Rigged card games, Loudi dice, shell games run by trained teams. Fixed auctions. If a man complained, he was ignored. If he pushed harder, he was threatened. If he caused trouble, he disappeared from public view. Control through corruption. Soapy didn't just steal money, he bought protection. Local law enforcement was compromised almost immediately. Officers accepted bribes or favors. Court cases quietly vanished. Complaints were dismissed without investigation. Skagway had laws on paper. In practice, it had permission. Permission for Soapy Smith to operate. He positioned himself as a community leader. He donated to charities. He spoke publicly about order and stability. He made sure the town believed he was keeping things under control. And for many people, that was true. Crime existed, but it was organized. Violence was limited, but only because it was managed. Chaos was avoided because Soapy decided who was allowed to cause it. The cost of silence. Miners learned quickly. Don't challenge Soapy Smith. Don't trust the courts. Don't expect protection. Most simply passed through Skagway, poorer and wiser, and moved on toward the Yukon. Others stayed and adapted, learning how to live under criminal rule. But resentment was growing. Business owners outside Soapy's network suffered. Honest citizens were pushed aside, and some newcomers refused to accept what Skagway had become. The town was stable, but brittle, and when pressure finally mounted, the structure Soapy built would collapse in a single violent moment. Resistance, vigilantes, and the gunfight that ended it all. By the summer of 1898, Skagway had reached a breaking point. The gold rush was at its peak. Ships arrived daily. Thousands passed through the town, and with them came money, tension, and anger. Soapy Smith's control was no longer invisible. It was resented. Honest merchants were being squeezed out. Newcomers were being robbed before they ever left the docks. And the courts continued to look the other way. That silence sparked resistance. The citizens pushed back. A group of local businessmen and residents formed what they called the Committee of 101, a vigilante organization determined to restore order where the law had failed. They didn't trust the police. They didn't trust the courts. And they didn't trust Soapy Smith. Their goal was simple: remove criminal control from Skagway. Tensions rose quickly. Soapy knew the committee existed. The committee knew Soapy was watching them. Both sides prepared for confrontation. July 8th, 1898. The moment came suddenly. On the evening of July 8th, a ship arrived carrying a large amount of gold. Members of Soapy's gang attempted to run one of their usual scams at the docks. This time, the victims fought back. A guard named Frank Reed, aligned with the Committee of 101, confronted Soapy's men. Word spread fast. Soapy Smith armed himself and went directly to the dock, determined to reassert control publicly. The confrontation was brief and fatal. The gunfight. As Soapy approached, Frank Reed stood his ground. Witnesses later described a tense standoff. Words exchanged, weapons visible, neither man willing to step aside. Then gunfire. Soapy Smith was shot and collapsed to the dock. Frank Reed was also hit, mortally wounded. Soapy Smith died almost instantly. Frank Reed was carried away and died days later from his injuries. The town froze. In a matter of seconds, Skagway's criminal ruler was gone. The aftermath. With Soapy Smith dead, his empire collapsed immediately. His gang scattered. Corrupt officials lost protection. The Committee of 101 took control of order in the town. For the first time since the gold rush began, Skagway experienced something close to real law enforcement. But the victory came at a cost. 2 men were dead. The town's reputation was permanently scarred, and the truth was impossible to ignore. Skagway had allowed a criminal to rule, not because he was powerful, but because the town needed order and accepted the wrong kind. The gold rush would not last forever. And without chaos to exploit, Skagway would soon change again. After the gold, what Skagway became. Soapy Smith's death did not end Skagway's problems. It ended an era. With the criminal network dismantled and vigilantes briefly maintaining order, Skagway entered a new phase, one defined not by lawlessness, but by uncertainty. The gold rush slowed. Prospectors who once flooded the docks moved on toward the interior or left Alaska entirely. Businesses that depended on constant arrivals began to fail. Hotels emptied. Gambling halls closed. Saloons went quiet. Skagway had been built to serve chaos. Without chaos, it struggled to survive. From boomtown to bypass, new routes to the Yukon reduced Skagway's importance. Transportation systems changed. The urgency that once fueled the town disappeared. Population numbers dropped steadily. Former power brokers vanished from public life. Corruption lost its leverage without money to feed it. For the first time, Skagway had rules, but far fewer people to enforce them on. The town did not collapse violently like other boom towns. Instead, it deflated, slowly, quietly, almost politely, a reputation that wouldn't fade. Even as order returned, Skagway could not escape its past. Soapy Smith's story followed the town everywhere. Visitors asked about the gunfight. Newspapers repeated the legend. Skagway became synonymous with criminal rule during the gold rush. That reputation was both a burden and an opportunity, because unlike many towns destroyed by crime, Skagway still had something valuable: location, survival, memory, and the cost of power. Skagway survived by doing what many ghost towns could not. It adapted. As the gold rush faded into history, Skagway reinvented itself as a port town, a transportation hub, and eventually a place of memory. Railroads replaced stampeders. Tourists replaced prospectors. History replaced gold, preserving the past. Instead of erasing its darkest chapter, Skagway preserved it. Buildings were restored. Stories were documented. The dock where Soapy Smith fell became part of the town's identity. Skagway chose to remember, not to glorify crime, but to explain it. The lesson Skagway left behind. Skagway's story is not just about one criminal. It's about what happens when a community accepts order at any cost. Soapy Smith didn't seize power by force alone. He was allowed to rule because he offered structure in a place drowning in chaos. The town looked away. Officials stayed silent, and crime filled the vacuum. When resistance finally came, it arrived too late to prevent bloodshed. Skagway paid for stability with violence. What remains? Today, Skagway is not a ghost town, but it carries the weight of one. Its streets are quieter, its buildings stand restored, and its history is openly acknowledged. Skagway survived because it changed, but it never escaped the truth of what it once was: a town that trusted the wrong man with power and learned too late what that trust cost.